She's Jori Epstein. He's Frank Schwab. I'm Jason Fitz. It's Inside Coverage, where we break down the why and how of everything going on in the NFL. And 1 week of action is in the books. You know what? It feels good, guys. It feels good that we have so much football to talk about. We don't have to sit here and just talk about imaginary things and things that don't matter. Like contract. Wait, let's start with contracts. All right. So I joke, but obviously as we get rolling into this episode, I've been excited because, Jori, you know the Cowboys incredibly well. And Sunday morning, getting ready for Fantasy Football Live, getting everything connected, all is good. We're getting ready for the show, and all of a sudden, bam, we get breaking news piece after breaking news, not the least of which was that we got a massive, massive contract for Dak Prescott. So you know this organization, you know this player. What can you tell us?
Yeah, I was in Cleveland for the Cowboys at Browns game, and I was about to go for a run, waiting for my GPS start, already stretched, and it's like, this deal broke, and I was like, oh, okay, this is happening. But I think I was actually really surprised this deal went down. I really, and I've said this on the podcast, thought that they were going to take it to the spring because Dak Prescott had leverage way beyond what the Cowboys had for two reasons. One, there's always going to be more demand than supply for quarterbacks in the NFL. And so if you have demand exceeding supply, there are probably going to be 5 to 10 teams willing to pay Dak Prescott a whole lot of money next year. And when you have other suitors, well, then your market price goes up. This is not like the Cowboys have Michael Penix waiting in the wings. Like, Trey Lance is not ready to be their quarterback. Cooper Rush is a good backup, but he's not their starter. And so the Cowboys did not have an option. I think that's ultimately a big factor in why this deal got done, because Jerry Jones went to Dak Prescott at practice on Saturday. I love this story. Basically, I talked to Dak about this after the game, and I was like, explain to me this. Like, did Jerry come up to you in the locker room? Did he come to practice? This is, again, one day before the deal got done. And Dak said that Jerry walks into practice, and Dak was so unsuspecting that they were close to a contract that he literally looks at Jerry, continues throwing, and then Jerry's kind of still walking, and Dak asks the other quarterbacks, is he coming for me? And they're like, yeah. And Dak's like, F. Not even Matt. He's just like, what is going on? Because Dak doesn't ask his agent for daily updates on the contract because he knows that would be a distraction when he has a game to prepare for. So Jerry comes up and is like, let's go shock the world. I want you to be the quarterback for the rest of my life, which, by the way, Dak was like, dude, I'm giving you more than 4 to 5 years. Let's keep going past then. Lo and behold. And then still, so Dak calls his agent afterwards. He calls Todd Franson. It's like, hey, Jerry came up to me. Are we close? And Todd's like, I don't know. They haven't caved on certain things. There are still elements of this contract that we're not there yet. I'm not sure it's going to get done. So Dak told me he boarded the plane to Cleveland expecting to play without a deal, and he was comfortable with that. Again, he still has this year left. He's played out final years of contracts before, and then he's in the team hotel room Sunday morning. His physical therapist is getting him right for the game, and his agent FaceTimes him and is like, we got the deal. And so when you look at the face value of the deal, I think that context is really important, because a lot of times we see quarterbacks reset the market, especially if they're in that tier of good to great. But you see them reset the market by about $1 million a year. We had 3 quarterbacks at the top of the market at $55 million a year, and Dak's new deal is for $60 million a year, which is just insane. But I think what happened is Dak and his representation say, okay, you don't want to pay me 60? I can go get 65 on the open market in the spring. Mm-hmm. The salary cap is going up. Multiple teams are going to be bidding on me. I can do it. And oh, by the way, well, Deshaun Watson had $230 million in guarantees on his deal, so give me $231. So beat the guarantees by a little bit and the annual average by a lot. And so I think also when you look at this for the Cowboys, this is one of the rare times where I actually think it was a smart move for them, because you might pay him 63 if you get him in the spring per year. Well, that's 12 million more that you have to pay over the next 4 years of that deal. And so that is kind of some background of how it went down. But hey, after all of the hemming and hawing in the offseason, CeeDee Lamb got done, Dak Prescott got done. Were you guys surprised? And what did y'all think of this deal?
My first thought, Jori, was pretty much exactly what you just said. I saw the numbers, and I think everybody else was going to be shocked. And I said to myself, he just took a discount. He could have got Mark Davis was going to be sitting there with a blank check.
Dak said that at the podium. He said we kind of met in the middle, and everyone's like, honestly, the middle, but yeah.
I think if he hit true free agency, if he got through this year and played like we think Dak is going to play, again, this guy finished second in the MVP voting last year. If he played like Dak was going to play, and the Cowboys are the Cowboys basically, I mean, they look great in week 1. I think that he was going to hit, if he hit the true open market, not just the Raiders, but you'd have, obviously, the Cowboys would want him back. And then teams like the Jets, maybe the Seahawks, teams that we don't know where their quarterbacks are, the Giants, teams that might have a quarterback. You might have had 4 or 5 teams bidding. I said 65. I don't think it's honestly crazy if he could have got the 70.
Yeah.
Because
there are definitely people involved in the negotiation who thought that was possible.
You can't tell me.
Because We've never seen this before where a quarterback hits the open market like that, except for Kirk Cousins.
You can't tell me Mark Davis wasn't watching Gardner Minshew thinking, yeah, I'd have paid $80 million. I don't care.
Yeah,
like,
right?
Whatever it takes.
Here's the keys to the stadium,
funny
Dak,
you
whatever.
say that because we're recording this on Wednesday, so a few days after the deal, and I had someone this morning who I really trust tell me like Mark Davis would have paid him more, and we were ready for that to happen. But I do think it's true, and yet when I look at this deal, first of all, credit to the Cowboys. They literally said, like, Dak was willing to make a commitment to us. Like, they acknowledged that leverage that he had, and I did not expect them to publicly acknowledge it. But the other thing I'll say is when I watched the Browns play, okay, if you look at what Deshaun Watson has, first of all, clearly Deshaun Watson is not performing at the same level as Dak Prescott right now.
No.
And so when you think about what the
nice.
Cowboys could be looking at if you don't have a quarterback, I think you just have to look on the other side of the field. Alternatively, okay, what if you say it wasn't all Deshaun Watson? He didn't have his left tackle. He didn't have his right tackle. He didn't have his running back. Well, I think that's kind of one of the reminders of why you might want to play for a team like the Cowboys and not the Raiders, because the pieces around you are just going to be at a different level. The Giants, look at what the Giants did this week. And so I think it's kind of like a win-win for both sides of they got the deal done. The Cowboys don't have to go find another quarterback when, by the way, Jori is nostalgic about whatever amount of time he has left in his life and not wanting to be quarterbackless at the end of his life. And then on top of that, Dak doesn't have to go into this season being like, hey, next year am I playing with a cast that just has no chance of winning a Super Bowl instead of like, hey, we have to get over the hump, but we're going to be a talented team.
I mean, my prediction, Frank, you'll remember, was the Raiders would sign him to a 4-year deal worth $65 million a year, fully guaranteed. Yeah. Turns out it was $60 million, almost fully. Like, what's the other $9 million? Like 240 of it.
That either.
Like,
that was the weirdest
what's the $9
thing.
million sitting around?
That was the absolute weirdest thing in that whole deal. That there's just like, we're only going to do 231 to 240. Okay.
It was because Deshaun Watson was at 230 and so they beat him.
But still,
I'm just saying, like, just fully guarantee the other $9 million. Just throw it on there and be like, you know what, for good measure, you can have all 240 of it.
And Jori, let me ask you a quick question, because I think the second after I was like, okay, he took a little bit of a discount. My second thought, honestly, was we've talked all summer, and what was the talking point? The Cowboys can't get all three of these guys done. Something's got to give.
Right.
CeeDee got his deal. Dak got his deal. Do you think they still re-sign Micah Parsons, or what's gonna happen there? Because it's hard for me to believe that you could have the top paid quarterback, I think second top paid receiver, and probably the top paid pass rusher. Those are the three money positions along with left tackle in the NFL. Can the Cowboys possibly pay Micah now too?
I think when I feel confident about that, it's both one reason inside the Cowboys and one reason outside. So when you look at the Cowboys' top foes in the NFC, I would say it's the Eagles, because obviously the division, they're a good team, and the San Francisco 49ers. Well, who are those people paying right now? You've got Brandon Ayuk, you've got Deebo Samuel, you've got Trent Williams, you've got Nick Bosa, and then in Philly, you're paying Jalen Hurts at quarterback, you're paying A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, now you got Saquon Barkley in the mix, among others, and I think when you look at it, again, that same person I was talking to this morning told me there's a way to get it done, and anyone who's saying there's not enough money to go around, that's about the owner being willing to pay, not about the salary cap being workable. And I asked the person, I said, I always try and think in these situations, what would Howie Roseman do? Because he seems to have some sort of like magic pill to the salary cap. And they said what Howie would have done is he said, okay, Nick Bosa's making 34. He would have this past April offered Micah 35 a year for however many years Nick's deal was, and gotten the deal done, not at a cheap price, but early so that you're paying the guy and you're offering him so much money that it's hard to turn down. I think what the Cowboys probably should do, assuming Micah has the same type of year this year, is say, okay, it's March, it's April, or maybe even a little before free agency, because they can negotiate sooner since he's under contract with them, not another team. Offer him that like maybe 36 a year or something like that. Make him the highest paid non-quarterback in the league, but do it right away before anyone else gets the deal done. That's probably their best option. I do think, and I know I talked a lot this past offseason of you want to see these guys perform well into the postseason. It's also interesting because pass rushers can slow down in a way a little bit different than quarterbacks later in the year, just because of the pursuit and like the physicality as opposed to the quarterback degree of the position that is mental. And so I do want to see Micah be able to carry the momentum through December, through January, ideally into February for the Cowboys. But I think they're at the point where if Micah plays anywhere close to what he did against the Cleveland Browns, where, by the way, he was a menace from the edges for most of the game, and then he did have a couple snaps. I think he had like 9 snaps at defensive tackle and maybe 2 from linebacker, and he was really a problem everywhere. And so, and I think the other point is from the Dallas standpoint, the reason you feel like you can pay Micah Parsons is because if you're paying Dak, Amari, and Micah, what you need to be able to do is draft really, really well. Well, they had 2 rookies starting on the offensive line, and you would not have known that. Like, yes, Myles Garrett and Dalvin Tomlinson, all of them had a few like great snaps, but it did not look like two rookies were starting on the offensive line for Dallas. And then you look at the other side of the ball.
A lot of people, yeah.
Yeah, like DeMarvion Overshone, who is technically a second-year player, but he missed all of last year for the ACL. Good. His closing speed with the blitzes that Mike Zimmer was employing him for, that looks awesome. And so I think you have enough talent in the rookie classes that basically what's happened in the NFL is you have a lot less of a middle class. And so you do sign your really high-priced players, and then you really have to get like the guys on rookie deals. And the Cowboys under Will McClay have drafted well enough that they can do that should they choose to.
So, and that brings us to one of our segments we're going to do here, news or noise. And one thing I'll say about Micah, any conversation about the Cowboys not signing Micah Parsons to me is noise. And we need to learn from this because I'm tired. I'm tired of sitting here saying they're never going to get a deal done with Zeke, only for them to get the deal done with Zeke. They're not going to get the deal done the first time with Dak, only to get the deal done with Dak. Well, they're certainly not going to sign CeeDee. That's got to mean something, only to sign CeeDee. The Cowboys aren't even interested in Dak. They don't want him anymore, especially not at that price, only to watch historic value. Like, everybody, sit down, shut up, color in your books at this point, because you're wrong about the Cowboys every damn time. At some point, stop. Micah Parsons is going to be re-signed for market value whenever the Cowboys decide they want to do it. And that might not be on our time frame. It might not be on a time frame that makes sense, but they're going to do it because that's what they do every time. So instead of sitting here like worrying about whether or not the deal's going to get done, we need to start looking at the recent history over the course of the last 5, 6, 7 years. The Cowboys sign who they want to sign whenever they want to sign them on their time frame. And if we all just shut up about it, I don't think, Frank, that we'd have nearly this amount of chaos every time.
Yeah, Jori gets the deal done. And as Jori pointed out, like, if it's just about money, well, Jori's got some money. Like, he's not hurting. Like, he's not, getting in the couch.
Jori's like a rich grandpa. Like, I never knew my grandparents, but like, he's a rich grandpa. Right? He spends his money when he wants, how he wants, who he wants to spend it on, and like, it may not make sense to the rest of the family, but Frank, it gets done. Damn it.
Absolutely. And so, yeah, I totally agree that I do believe Michael will get done. I thought Dak would get done. There was a time when I didn't know if all three were getting done, but now I do. I think he's going to pay Micah what he's worth. And that's that. And by the way, speak about people being wrong about the Cowboys. We kind of touched on this on the Sunday show. The Cowboys look as good as ever. For all that offseason talk about, oh my God, Cowboys are doomed. They're going to regress. They're not even making the playoffs. They went to Cleveland and just handled a pretty good team. I get Deshaun Watson has his issues, and we'll talk about him in a second. But like, what are we going to, we're just going to do this every single year where we're like, oh my God, the Cowboys aren't going to be any good. Oh my God, Dak Prescott's going to the Raiders. Oh my God, they can't sign. And then they're going to sign everybody. And then they're going to come out, at least in a regular season, and look like a 12-win team like they have the past 3 years.
Somebody on this show predicted the Cowboys top seed in the NFC and an MVP Dak.
Fitz, Fitz is right on a lot of things, but Fitz, where you are wrong is that you said if we shut up, there won't be chaos. Jerry Jones does not want us to shut up. He wants us to talk about this. And so if you're not willing to give him the chaos on this front, he will find another reason to give you the chaos because that is his business model. That's why he's the most valuable franchise in all of sports.
Nobody's realized yet, Jori, that Jerry looks like the idiot, but we're all the idiots. Because Jori is just playing us.
I think one, yes, Jerry wants it, but two, on this deal, I legitimately believe that like this was not really a compromise. This was, hey, Dak's people were starting to negotiate at 60 given what the market was, and it was, hey, come up to that or don't. And so I think there was the Jerry nostalgia of like, let's do it, and then there was still that idea of like, Dak, Todd France, do you want to actually be willing to do this when you can make more money next spring? Well, okay, let's do it. Let's bet on the Cowboys. Let's bet on staying at home with the family, with his childhood favorite team, all of the things. And hey, he's still making a ton of freaking money. But I think what's interesting is that when I was at the Cowboys season opener last year, even though I've been on the national beat for both of these seasons, because it was in New York, it was at the Giants, and they beat the Giants from like 40-0. Okay, great. Everyone was like, now Cowboys are going to the Super Bowl. And I'm like, this is the New York Giants. This is also like this crazy momentum team with like the way that they were getting takeaways in that game is not something they're going to be able to replicate. I think this Cleveland game is totally different. Deshaun Watson might be washed. We can figure that out. They didn't have their left tackle, their right tackle, and their running back. Great. But for the Cowboys to go into opponent territory, an opponent that they're not so familiar with, they've always done very well in the NFC East, against a defensive line that could have caused them a lot of issues. You also have some quarterbacks who probably wouldn't be able to ride the waves the way that Dak did hours after getting that contract done. And to be able to get this win, it didn't look perfect. And I know like I'm very close with Dak, so I obviously have that lens that does inform my reporting. But I think that when you look at what he did, Dak was actually pretty disappointed in how he played because they didn't have an offensive touchdown in the second half. But if you look at the quarterback play across the league, unless you're Baker Mayfield playing against the Washington Commanders, and I know we'll get there, most of the quarterbacks had down weeks if you weren't playing like the bottom teams in the league. And so I think what you need to do in a game like this is know we're not going to get every shot because this is the number one defense from last year. We need to get enough shots. We need to get enough of a lead on that team and not make mistakes, which they didn't, and then go crush them. And I think that's what happened is that, yes, the ultimate score wasn't insane because they had some garbage time stats, but there was really never a time in that game where you felt like Cleveland was going to be able to come back.
Just remember, when the Cowboys hit 10 wins this year and Dak is the MVP, dinner's on me at the Super Bowl. I'm just saying, whoo, I'm making some racks. Okay, speaking of news and noise,
yes. I like how Fitz is like, don't forget I'm paying for your dinner. Okay, Frank and I are good with that.
Not hard to figure that out.
That's fair.
I'll save that in my phone,
if those things don't happen, you guys are buying me McDonald's, though, because I'll be broke ass. Okay, news or noise, let's continue the trend and let's look at the other side. Jori, you mentioned Deshaun. Deshaun absolutely looked terrible in this game. 169 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 picks, a QBR of 51.5. Obviously, we would be remiss as a show if we didn't at least acknowledge on top of that Monday additional allegations that are at this point just allegations of sexual misconduct, sexual battery, sexual assault have come out against Deshaun Watson. That is a part of the conversation. I will say clearly for right now, for what we're going to talk about, simply because all we have are allegations and we don't have full information to the scope of that at this point. What we do have is information about Deshaun on the field. So talking about Deshaun and the way he played in the game, particularly over the course of the weekend, the real question is, if you're the Browns, I mean, are you looking at Jameis? Because this looked terrible, Frank.
If you go back to some of our summer podcasts, I was saying I really, really like the Browns, even said I thought they could make a Super Bowl. But my whole point was I think Deshaun Watson could be an average quarterback. And they were really, really good around him. And then August came and there wasn't one good report out of Browns camp. Like, look, training camp is a time everybody's excited. Everybody's optimistic. Oh, my goodness, this new guy looks great. Best shape of his life. Deshaun Watson looks really, really good. There was none of that. You could not find a report that Deshaun Watson had a good camp. And then right at the end of the preseason, he all of a sudden has a shoulder injury, again, flare up. He doesn't play in the preseason finale. And it's like, I'm out. I can't, until we see Deshaun Watson actually play and play at a decent level, I'm out on the Cleveland Browns. And my goodness, it couldn't have gone any worse for him in week 1. And what I really thought was telling is that Kevin Stefanski gets up there after the game, and it wasn't, hey, Deshaun didn't play well. It was, well, we got to protect our quarterback better. He fought and fought. It just wasn't good enough from protection. Can we stop giving cover to Deshaun Watson? Like, at some point, they need to hold him accountable for how he's playing, and it is not good. Deshaun Watson has not been a good quarterback for them at all in 3 seasons. He has not been a good quarterback in the NFL since 2020. We're talking about a long time now before he sat out that last year at the Texans. And for the whole notion that we're going to talk about of can they get out of the contract, to this I say, they probably will try at some point, but I have no sympathy for the Browns whatsoever. They knew this was going on. Maybe not to the scope that we found out later, but maybe they did know the scope, but that doesn't even matter. They knew what was going on with Deshaun Watson. They sold their souls anyway. They made one of the worst trades in NFL history and signed one of the worst contracts in NFL history. They deserve no pity in this scenario. They are stuck with this, and they deserve to be stuck with this. I don't think Deshaun Watson is bouncing back anymore. What we saw Sunday is basically what Deshaun Watson is. And at some point, contract or not, Kevin Stefanski has to look at everybody in that locker room and say, I have to do what's best for the team. I can't keep putting him out there. Jameis Winston's going to make his mistakes. We've all seen Jameis Winston. We've been on the Jameis coaster. We know he's going to make 5 plays a game that you're just like, oh my goodness, Jameis, what are you doing? But at least he gives them a chance to win, which Deshaun Watson is not going to do this season. I truly believe that. I'm out on Deshaun. I'm out on the Browns until they make this quarterback change.
Yeah, here's what I'll say about this. I think that you are so right, Frank, to point to what Kevin Stefanski said, because when I was reading that transcript, the first thing that came to my mind was Robert Saleh talking about Zach Wilson last year. And the longer the season went on and the more he said people need to help out Zach, the more I was like, are you going to look your locker room in the eyes and tell them that? Because your credibility will suffer if you do that. I do not think the Browns are there yet because I think it's week 1. He did not have his left tackle. He did not have his right tackle. And he did not have Nick Chubb in the running game, which means that the Cowboys, who are historically in the last 5, however many years, way better at defending against the pass than the run, could sell out against him. So I think it is early. I'm not ready to say you should bench him yet. And I think I'm not ready to say that, 1, because I don't know that Jameis would do much better without a left tackle, a right tackle, and a running back. And 2, the Browns need this to work. If they want to have any sort of like really goodwill in the next few years, I don't think that you keep going up with 10 weeks of this, but I do think you give it 3 or 4. And if you look at their next schedule, basically, they're playing the Jaguars this week. Fine. I think that could go either way, but it's easier than the Cowboys. And then they play the Giants, then the Raiders, then the Commanders.
Yeah.
Well, those teams could all be terrible this year. They're definitely on pace for that. And so I think, the Raiders defense is going to be decent for them to go against. But I think what you do is you give Deshaun that stretch and say, you need to at least be able to do it against these teams. And ideally, maybe he gets 1 tackle, if not 2 back. I don't know. Nick Chubb seems a little farther off, but give him a little more help against a little easier defense and just see where he's at and see what you have to work with. And then you can figure out what to do with Jameis. But I do think that it looks really bad on and off the field for Deshaun right now. And in terms of will the Browns have some sort of like contractual out, I think I actually did obtain a copy of Deshaun's contract yesterday. So that would be I don't even know the days of the week. That would be Tuesday. And it was interesting because it was the most updated contract. So it had the restructure that the Browns did this offseason. And the key part to me was every contract has something where it's basically protecting the club if the player does something. And so the contract could, quote, be terminated for engaging in personal conduct that reasonably is judged by the club to materially and adversely affect or reflect on the club. But then in Deshaun's contract, there's a parenthetical that says, excluding the specific facts disclosed to club in writing, pursuant to blah, blah, blah. So that parenthetical, I think, is going to be the difference here. First of all, the NFL is investigating Deshaun's latest allegations. They are at least treating it, as our colleague Charles Robinson has said, as not guaranteed to be just a continuation of what happened previously. But from what I understand in this contract, this is basically if Deshaun told the Browns about this previously, the Browns can't say, what do you mean this happened? Because Deshaun told them. If Deshaun and his team did not disclose this previously, the Browns have protected themselves. It was kind of like a tell us everything you have going on now, and that's what you get immunity from, but you're not necessarily protected if you haven't been disclosed. And so I think that will really be like the key legal element of if the Browns try and get out. And I also don't think anything is going to happen anytime soon because these NFL investigations are never quick.
The allegations are from 2020. So this is not something that was taking place recently. This is not something that took place while he was a member of the Cleveland Browns. To Jori's point, if he did not notify them in writing, if that does give them the out, my only follow-up question to the Cleveland Browns would be, the Browns made it clear when they signed Deshaun that they had done their own investigation, that they had ripped through everything and that they were comfortable signing the player. So my question is, if this wasn't disclosed and you didn't discover it, how thorough was your own investigation? That's, I think
true.
There is, again, accountability that belongs to the Cleveland Browns in this process. Either they knew about it or they should have discovered it if they did the investigation they want the world to believe they did before they made the financial investment in Deshaun Watson. If none of that happened, shame on Deshaun, shame on the Cleveland Browns as well.
Yes, I to reiterate, the Browns deserve nothing here. The Browns deserve to get stuck with that contract at $172 million dead cap if they want to cut him next offseason because they knew what they were doing. And for some loophole to cut, basically to try to get out of this contract, no. I am actively rooting against the Cleveland Browns right here getting out of that contract. You signed this knowing what you were getting into. You thought this was all going to blow over after a while. Let's be honest here, and they don't deserve any to get off the hook here. They made a deal with the devil. All $230 million.
They made a deal with the devil, and and at some point, you make that deal and pays through. The only thing I'd say about benching Deshaun that I think is important context, because you're right, they've got, after the Jags, they have 3 games in a row that look to be cupcakes for them, right? Like compared to where the Browns are supposed to be. The only thing is you can't give Deshaun all that time if you're thinking of making a change. What I wouldn't want to do is put Jameis in to suddenly have to go to Philly, then take on the Bengals, then take on the Ravens in 3 straight games. So, I think there's wiggle room, but I don't think it's the full wiggle room. Like, if Deshaun looks bad again this week, and then he goes into the first game of that soft schedule, looks bad against the Giants, I think that's when you have to, as an organization, say, man, I'd much rather put Jameis in against the Raiders and Commanders than put Jameis suddenly in against the Eagles.
No, it's a great point, Fitz, because the calculus that they have to balance against is long-term, we need Deshaun to work if we want to be a competitive organization year after year, probably, or at least not be having this insane dead cap. Short-term, how much longer could Dalvin Tomlinson and Myles Garrett and Zadarius Smith keep playing at this level, knowing that things looked way better with Joe Flacco last year? Like, if they had not seen a quarterback who could do this with the offense, then it's easier to blame it on the cast. But when you saw a quarterback switch totally turn this offense on last year, that really hurts Deshaun Watson's case. And I know Myles Garrett said after this game, the fans are booing us. They have the right. We need to give them a better product. Well, Myles Garrett gave them a good product. The team as a whole, and particularly the offense, and particularly Deshaun Watson did not. And so I do agree with you that there is a saturation point. I don't think we're there yet, but I definitely think that you're right. That also Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry have all of this tied up in them. And so I think one of the reasons that the two of them got their contract extensions over the offseason was because they were able to win in spite of Deshaun Watson, not because of Deshaun Watson. And so if you are getting your extension because of that, ownership might say, okay, great, I need you to prove that to me again.
It's amazing that that's where the Deshaun conversation has gone. All right, when we come back, Justin Fields is going to start another week for the Steelers. What's it mean? Plus some of the other big performances from week 1 as we digest how all of it will impact week 2. Coming up next. All right, I say this every week. I'm not big into conspiracy theories, y'all. I'm not. Like, if we didn't walk on the moon, doesn't change my Wednesday. It doesn't, right? Like, I don't really care. I don't really care, if there were 72 people in the grassy knoll, like, that shot Kennedy, doesn't really impact my Wednesday.
Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce are going to break up on September 28th or whatever it is.
Look, that also, although, my buddy's Taylor Swift drummer, I would think that he would give me a heads up if he thought that was going to happen. Matt called me. All right. But that being said, come on, Matt. That being said, Justin Fields going to start against the Broncos, and I'm wiggling my fingers because I'm sitting here saying, I don't know. Frank and I said that Justin Fields is going to get the job week 1. He did not get the job week 1, supposedly rusted, but then calf tightness has him out. Justin Fields comes in. I don't know. Jori, am I reading too far into this? Am I like, are the tarot cards point? Like, it just feels like maybe it's convenient Justin Fields keeps this job the rest of the year.
I think you're reading too far into it. Sorry. I think that if Justin Fields looked awesome against the Falcons, that'd be one thing. I don't think he did. I know our colleague Charles Robinson had his passing chart in Charles's article, and it's like, is there anything at all in the middle of the field or even
so
close
weird.
to the middle of the field?
Weirdest passing charts
and I
I've ever
understand
seen,
that it was a last-minute start and all that. I actually do give Mike Tomlin some credit, though, for saying that they're preparing for Justin Fields to start, because I think the risk they would otherwise run is Russell Wilson playing against the Broncos. There's a lot of motivation after how things went down in Denver for him to play this game. And that's not necessarily what's in the best case for Russell Wilson's health. And it's also not necessarily what's best for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think what matters most is how they finish this season and what he can be doing later on. And I think you also probably could ask yourself, well, if he had this calf injury in training camp and then felt like there was a quarterback competition, did he try and rush it to come back a little sooner? And that's how we got here in the first place. We don't want to do that again, especially when they probably can win without him over the next 2 to 3 weeks. I still think that Russell is a better quarterback right now. I'm not saying he's better for their long-term future. I think that we have to figure that out. But I think for this season specifically, I think he can probably operate the offense at a higher level than what Justin Fields can. And I think that there's probably a case for the Steelers saying, like, let's kind of develop Justin a little more beyond what he got in Chicago when he didn't have a cast around him, and then see what he can do.
I hate to disagree with Jori ever.
You can disagree. Always
but I think I disagree with you on
fight.
a lot of what you said. I agree with Fitz that not a conspiracy theory necessarily, but I do believe they were like, we got an out. We have an out. Let's give Justin the start because let's take another week, Russ. We don't want to rush you back, but. And then the second part is I don't think Russell Wilson is better for this offense. I'm not saying either guy's good. Let's put it that way. But I think Justin Fields does some things that we saw in the Atlanta game with his legs where he can make plays that Russ just can't. And I don't think that at this point in his career, Russ is that much of a better passer than Justin Fields. Justin Fields is obviously flawed as a passer, but still, I think he was 17 to 23. Like, he kept the chains moving. It wasn't a dynamic performance.
How many air yards are we talking about?
Yeah, right. It was like, somebody complained to me. They were like, Daniels completed 70% of his passes and you don't think he was any good. I'm like, yeah, he completed one pass 9 yards downfield. That's it. Like, come on. Like, let's not use completion percentage. So you are correct, Jori. I should not have used that stat. But yet I thought Justin looked okay. He was fine. And I really didn't think I thought Mike Tomlin was being very stubborn on this situation. And I thought he was just going to go back to Russ. I thought he was just going to say, nope, Russ is our guy. He's ready to go. We're going to play him because he's been stubborn about this. I was actually surprised when he said Justin's going to be the starter. I guess something could change. He left himself some wiggle room there if it has to, but I think Justin just gives him a better chance to win because of the things he can do that Russ can't, running the ball, scrambling, all that kind of stuff. And I don't think Russ is that much of a better passer at this point, if at all. So I just think that this is what they had to do. They had to see, can Justin Fields at least win us games? And week 1, the answer is yes. I mean, I get they didn't score a touchdown, but he did enough to keep it moving, to get him 6 field goals. I think that this is just what they got to see this through with Justin Fields now to see if he's a thing.
Right. You do have to see, like, if Justin Fields keeps winning, then you do keep him in. I mean, I saw that in Dallas in 2016 when Dak Prescott started and they just kept winning and winning and winning. And so it's like, okay, bye, Tony Romo. Head to the broadcast booth now.
Yeah.
But
At some
I do
point,
think,
it's just, you got to do what you got to do. Yeah.
and I think also one reason you want to say that Justin Fields is going to be the starter this week is if you look at the game plan last week, it did not seem like Justin and the Steelers as a whole were ready for him to start. Not that they were unprepared, but I don't think that they had developed the game plan to the extent that you would if you feel like he is the starter going in, because there are certain packages that with the athlete that Justin Fields is, you can put in. And so I think that that's probably one of the top reasons you want to have that be the precedent going in. And then if something changes, okay, fine.
I just need him to be in, not because it helps the Steelers win, but because it helps me win. I'm not sure there's ever been a stat more incorrect than Vegas weekly on the rushing props for Justin Fields. Like last year, they were wrong every week. This year, they were they're 1-0. Like, so hammer the over on Justin Fields quarterback rushing. Now that I've said that out loud, Frank, I'm sure we'll all become an abject disaster.
You jinxed it all. Thanks, Fitz.
I know.
Appreciate
Well, yeah. Well, let's see. I'd like it to last one more week. I already put my money on it. Baker Mayfield, another quarterback that we were watching, interestingly. And this one I was really wrong on, Jori. Like, I thought Dave Canales no longer being his offensive coordinator. I thought maybe that was like the quarterback whisperer relationship that had happened. Instead, we saw Mayfield come out and be efficient, but also willing to take chances down the field, threw the ball with a level of accuracy that I think we forget he has at times, made some big plays, just under 300 yards passing, 4 touchdowns, a real, just a beautiful, controlled football game for Baker Mayfield. That was a reminder how good he is right now and how good the weapons are for Tampa Bay. I felt like, I know it's only 1 week, but I felt like maybe I'm sleeping on Baker, maybe I'm sleeping on the Bucs.
I think Baker's a very good quarterback, and I think that he has really found a home in Tampa, found a home with those weapons, and just is playing at like such a high level, both because he's healthy and because he's in the right system for him. I think that when I look at so much of week 1, I say, great, this is a good data point. Now let's see if the week 2 data point continues to support the argument that we feel from week 1. He's going from playing the Commanders defense to the Detroit Lions defense. And by the way, it's really fun because it's a playoff rematch of what the Buccaneers and Lions had just a few months ago. And so I think that Baker will still play well this week, but I think that the level of competition he's going to be facing is at a whole nother level. And then we'll really have a sense of like, is he good or great?
I hate changing my mind after 1 week of NFL games because it's a small data point. At the point we are now where it's basically the preseason because these starters don't play or anything. But it's hard for me not to change my mind about the NFC South after 1 week. Kirk Cousins can't move. I mean, we saw that. I'll give him another week to see, but I think we pretty much know.
Frank is about to put a ton of stock into what happened against the Washington Commanders and Carolina Panthers. Please continue.
Yeah, I know, right? And maybe
I
the
think
Commanders.
You picked both of those teams to win too. Like I
did. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Fitz. I appreciate you, buddy. I appreciate you very much, Jason. Yeah, that's great. You're gonna be Jason from now on.
I was gonna say, wow, we're calling him Jason.
That's when you know things got real. Suddenly, I got my first name treatment. Wow.
If I knew your middle name, I'd give you a Jason Michael right now or whatever. But I just, the Bucs probably, like, there were some things about the Bucs that losing Canales. There's stuff like their defensive red zone success last year is totally unsustainable. So I'm like, this team's going to come back to earth a little bit. I thought the Commanders would be better in the secondary because of Dan Quinn. Obviously they're not, but still, to play like Baker did on Sunday against another NFL defense was very impressive. And now you got to say, yeah, the Bucs are probably the favorite again in that division until we see Kirk Cousins look better or the Buccaneers look worse. And I'm not sure we're going to see either one of those things. It was a very impressive performance by Baker Mayfield, who you just don't see stories like this very often. He was cut and benched twice and cut by the Carolina Panthers 2 years ago. We all remember the Rams-Raiders game.
That actually might be like a case for why he's good, because I feel like everything the Panthers do, the rest of the league would want to do the opposite.
Right, exactly. I mean, let's the Panthers cut Baker and they had Sam Darnold too, and both played incredible. It's just a reminder that maybe coaching matters. I'm not Nate Tyson, the Sam Darnold thing. It's one game. Let's relax, Nate. Like calm down. But I'm just saying that Panthers had them both in the building.
Yeah, and it's just one of those things where Baker's just completely reformed himself. And kudos to him. He took less money last year just because he was like, I don't want to get on the backup train yet. I want one more chance to prove I could be a starter. He took less money than Taylor Heineke took from the Falcons. He just wanted to start, and now he's cashed in, and now he looks like a really above average starting quarterback at very least. I don't know where you're ranking him, but it can't be below 16 at this point. He looks really good in that offense with those weapons.
Mike Evans is so good.
Oh my goodness, he is that catch he made where he just kind of worked his way around the corner and snagged it out of the air for the touchdown. It was like that's unbelievable. That is unbelievable stuff by Mike Evans.
And he's just been doing it for so long and sustained it across that entire time. I mean, this is a guy who's had over 1,000 yards. 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, it's like 11 straight seasons over 1,000.
Unbelievable. First ballot Hall of Famer.
I mean, he's 31, and I feel like he's been in the league for 87 years. Like, I feel like Mike Evans has been in the league forever at this point. But you're right. It's
dog years, maybe.
Okay, that's divided by 7. So that's I'll buy that. That was Baker was another great performance. I don't know that this was a great performance, but if we're looking at the things we really liked from week 1, I love chaos. I'm an agent of chaos. I love the fact that roughly 45% of the survivor pools in Yahoo Sports were killed in 1 week. 1 week, because the New England Patriots took down the Bengals. But here's the thing, y'all. Like, the Bengals do this every year. The Bengals suck for the first month of the season every year. And then they wake up. Yeah. And every year we sit here like Kermit the Frog running around like, and the Bengals are going to be just fine, right? Like, so I know maybe it's not the same. I don't know. I just feel like the Bengals don't really care until it's time for the Bengals to care. So I don't know how much weight I should put into this, Frank.
This is the one result from week 1 I'm just throwing out. Maybe like some of the Eagles-Packers stuff because that game was so weird. But I don't really think the Patriots are going to be good, and I don't think the Bengals are going to be bad. In fact, I had Patriots still 30th in power rankings. I just don't believe in them. I had to move them up a little bit because, oh my God, I saw the Panthers and Giants play football on Sunday. But I don't think the Patriots are going to be good. I don't think the Bengals are going to be bad. I don't know why they start this poorly every year, but it is a thing. It is truly a thing. And am I wrong about it? Jori, like, do you think the Patriots are decent? Do you think the Bengals stink? I just think this is the one game. There's always a game we look back in December. We'll look back at week 1 and be like, how in the heck did that happen? I think that this game is that for me.
I was laughing at myself because when we did our predictions last week for the season, I picked the Patriots to have the top overall draft pick and Joe Burrow to win MVP. And I'm like, yeah, week 1 is going great for me. I think on one hand, I would way rather a team be hitting its stride in December than in September. I also think that if the Bengals fall into the trap of believing because we've done it before, we can do it again, that's very, very dangerous, especially if Joe Burrow isn't fully healthy. And he is coming back from another surgery. Like, health has obviously been the biggest knock on him. But there probably is a limit to how many times you can come back from the injuries. Whether he's there yet or not is to be seen. But I know that last year was like when the Eagles were something like 10-1, they had their first loss, and they're like, I don't know. I think last year when the Eagles were at that place, there's this kind of idea of like, okay, you don't have to be playing well as long as you're getting the wins. And then they just kind of dovetailed. And I think the Bengals could reach this point of like, no, there always is a way to climb out of the hole. And maybe there will be a point at which there was. And I also think I was looking at some stats about their week 1 losses. And I think it's the biggest week 1 upset since 2018, according to ESPN research. And their 3-year losing streak in week 1 is the longest in the league. And dating back to 2019, they're the only team in the NFL to have fewer than 2 total wins in the first 2 weeks of the season. So, like, this is really, really bad. And again, yes, they had their 1 Super Bowl year, but they haven't been great all of those years. And so I do think you kind of have to figure out, why is this happening? And how do you make sure that it really is something you climb out of? Because there might be years that you can't.
Yeah, that is true. You can't constantly start behind in the race and just always depend on being able to catch up, for sure. All right, when we come back, that was some of the best. We'll take a look at some of the most questionable and some of the other interesting week 1 moments that we'll see how they play into week 2. We'll do that when we come back. Frank, you mentioned power rankings earlier, by the way, out at Yahoo Sports, and thank you. You only, the Raiders were still at 25 this week. That's how damaged I am as a fan, that I'm like, oh, 25, that's not bad. Like, it's not 30.
There are
like,
people worse than us.
I mean, I literally have to look at them and be like, who sucked more than we did last week? But part of that conversation has to look at the fact that the Chargers didn't charge it. Late in the game, the Raiders had the ball with the opportunity to potentially put themselves in a situation to win the game.
And they punted
4th and 1. Punt. You and I have already had this argument repeatedly. I still think they didn't have a choice because they weren't getting the 4th down either way. You made clear that absolutely it didn't matter. They shouldn't have done it. But more important to all of that, the Chargers didn't charge it. Like, when they needed to, they found a way to win this football game. And I thought Justin Herbert, frankly, the numbers won't show how good Justin Herbert was. If you look back at that game, he was getting murdered the entire game and throwing the ball quickly. His receivers weren't anywhere near ready to catch those balls. But like, the fact that the Chargers found a way to win a tight game, I think, Frank, that's a statement to Harbaugh and the Chargers not charging. Like, that's a little bit of a tip of the cap.
Yeah, sure. I'll give them that. I want to see them do it against better competition, but they play the Panthers this week. I get it's on the road, but should be 2-0. After that, you go play at the Steelers. It's not an easy out by any means, but I think it's a kind of team you could at least be in the game late and maybe pull it out. So maybe they can get on a roll early in the season, get some confidence, kind of settle in under Harbaugh and win some games. I'm still not high on the Chargers. I still think they're going to have overall a rough season. Jim Harbaugh's first season, he's going to be a great hire. In 3 years, we're going to look up and be like, wow, the Chargers are really, really good because Harbaugh's an awesome coach. I don't think it's going to happen this year still, but at least, in week one, it all looked good. They ran the ball well. They didn't blow it at the end of the game, like you alluded to. Their defense looked really good. I mean, how much of that is Raiders offense? How much of that is their defense? I don't know, but the defense did really what it had to do. So I think we get to a point where good on the Chargers for winning, and we might look up and they're 3-0 to start the season or something like that. Which, hey, they'll take that after the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think also I'll be very curious to see, can J.K. Dobbins stay healthy? Because I think if they can, that will be huge for the Chargers. I think that when you have that offensive line, you still need the guy who's going to run behind them. And J.K. Dobbins has been with other good offensive lines and just not been able to stay healthy. And so to have, 135 yards and a touchdown rushing and caught a couple passes as well, I think that was such a huge, momentum start for that team. Because, again, the Chargers defense was going against an offense that we all kind of questioned, but the Raiders defense people respect. And so to be able to rush like that against that defense, I do think there's something to be said for that.
I also think there's probably not a ton to take from what looks like 2 7, maybe 6-win teams going at it. Honestly, I think by the time this whole season normalizes, the Chargers and the Raiders are both not particularly great. Speaking of not great, Marvin Harrison Jr., and we all people were drafting him early in their fantasy leagues across Yahoo Fantasy. Everybody's in love with Marvin Harrison Jr. I humble brag all the time that I'm a Blitnikoff Award voter. The most interesting stat that we had with the Blitnikoff Award this year is that when we were voting, is Marvin Harrison in his entire college career was credited with how many drops? 0. None. So what do we see in his first game in the pros? Wide open, ball just slams off of his hands and hits the ground. This was not the Marvin Harrison any of expected. He had more drops in this game, 1, than he had in his entire career. He had 1 catch for 4 yards. I just was a little surprised, Frank, to see that Marvin Harrison Jr. made virtually no impact in a game that the Chargers or the Cardinals were in for much of.
Yeah, I agree with it was surprising, but my panic meter on this is 0, maybe 1, because I do have him in some fantasy leagues.
Are you talking 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 100?
Yeah, 1 out of 10. 10 being
1 out of 3.
Oh my God, fire everybody and just get a new roster.
1 out of 1.
Panic, just 1. I just don't think Marvin Harrison's going to be a brick this season. I think he's going to be awesome. I think this was the one-off. Buffalo's a really well-coached team, really good defensive team. Yeah, the drop was just, I think there were some nerves. If I remember right, he played 3 snaps in a preseason, ran 1 route and didn't get a target. This was his first NFL experience, and I think he's going to be just fine. But yeah, rough debut for Marvin Harrison. But I believe it wouldn't shock me at all if this week he puts up 110 yards. I've said this term many, many times, a gold jacket talent. I still believe in him completely. I have no worries about Marvin Harrison having a monster rookie season.
I think one of the reasons that I believe he'll rebound is because Drew Petzing and that offensive staff was so impressive last year that I think they will figure out what was he not confident in this week and how can we try and build that confidence early, whether that's getting him involved, whether that's running some sort of easy completion to him early in the game just to get that confidence up. But I do think that the Cardinals should be very intentional about managing the mental element of him just to make sure that he can kind of psychologically feel hey, I can do this.
Also, it should be noted, how long has it been since he played any meaningful football? And didn't participate at the combine. Things have just been different for him. So I think there's a little bit of rust, and that's allowed. One thing we were all watching, and Jori, I'm interested to get your thoughts on this because so much was made about kickoffs. So 63.5% of the kickoffs in the first 15 games went for touchbacks. That's about a 9.5% decrease over last year. So more returns, I guess. But if we were looking for dynamic, oh my God moments, the kickoff definitely didn't give that to us.
Yeah, I think on one hand, you could say that if teams are still figuring it out, maybe we'll see that over time. I also am a little bit cynical and believe that the NFL just has to point to specific things they're doing on health and safety so that when they keep making these players fly halfway across the world to play games and then the quarterback of the Green Bay Packers is no longer available. I'm not saying that's only because of what happened with the travel, but I don't think it helps. I think that they kind of were hip drop tackle. This happened 3 times last year, but let's eliminate that. So I'm skeptical for some of the health benefits of this. I don't feel strongly about kickoffs. Frank, do you have a stronger take on kickoffs?
I just think I've said, and you can see it in the preseason where the touchback rate rose each of the 3 preseason weeks. coaches are very risk averse. They do not want to gamble. They're not like Fitz and me. They don't dabble at all. These guys are.
They
they'll
can't
stay
gamble, Frank. There's strong rules against gambling in the NFL.
They will stay on 11 in blackjack, because who knows what might happen. The 12 card might come out for them. So I just think that we're going to see coaches just booted out of the back of the end zone. We saw DJ Dallas of the Cardinals return one all the way. There were a lot of 40-plus type returns. Coaches don't want to give up big plays right away to start. I think they're going to get back in the mode of saying, if I got a kicker, you just kick it out of the back of the end zone. We're fine. You start at the 30. That means DJ Dallas isn't taking it to the house on us. I think that the intentions were good with the kickoff rule, but the penalty for a touchback wasn't enough. So you're going to see these risk-averse coaches saying, just boot it out of the end zone. We don't care. I'm not giving up a 55-yard return right here to start this drive. So I think the effects of this rule, well, we saw some, like you said, 95.5% is not nothing. It's interesting, and there are a lot of long returns. I think that's going to dwindle over time. We're going to go back to the same old, like the kickoff is just kind of ceremonial and everyone goes to the back of the end zone.
I mean, and they're sort of damned if they do and damned if they don't. If the kickoff becomes something that explodes and there's returns all the time, coaches are going to want to tighten up the rules. If you get touchbacks all the time, then what's the point? So yeah, you're right, Jori. I think this is all just a nice little ploy for health and safety. And I will just say quickly, the hip drop tackle is just proof positive that the NFL realizes how stupid most fans are, because they're going to sit here and say, we're going to rule this out. And then fans lose their mind all over social media. It's not even football. But if you got those, it's not even football guys, and you actually sat down with them and said,
there was one hip drop tackle a week last year in the entire league, like per league. Think about how many tackles happened in the NFL last year. And I think there were like 18 of these across the entire league, every game being played.
That's
Zero
why I
flags
laugh,
in the preseason. Yeah.
People are yelling, well, this isn't even football anymore. You can't even tell me what the hell a hip drop tackle is. So just shut up. Like, this just, it's the league. Just, putting the metal out on there. All right. Speaking, those fans suck. Speaking of things that suck, Bryce Young apparently still just the captain of the suck tree. And look, I'm rooting for Bryce. I love it when guys come out and perform. I expected, with the investments that Carolina made in the offensive line, particularly, I thought that would take a lot off of Bryce's plate and really make him a better quarterback. And instead, it was the opposite. He throws an interception on his first pass attempt of the season. He ends up with 161 yards passing, no touchdowns, 2 picks, and a 10.5 QBR that actually feels generous compared to the way he looked in the game. Like, it feels early, Frank, but my God, I don't know how you're not supposed to, at this point, kind of feel like the sky is falling on the number 1 pick from last year's draft.
I agree. And I held out hope this offseason because they did make all the improvements. I said, you know what? I really did like Bryce Young as a prospect. I thought he did everything well except he was short, basically. That was it. He did everything else pretty well. Obviously had a winning pedigree, all that kind of stuff. And for him to come out in week 1 and look like this was so disheartening, because I don't think he has the excuses anymore. Last year he did. Like, they gave him Adam Thielen as his number 1 receiver, and they had no offensive line in front of him, and they changed coaches in the middle of the season. All the stuff that could go wrong for a rookie quarterback, Bryce Young had that put in his lap. Year 2, they paid the guards. They drafted a lot of skill position guys. New coach who obviously had a big say in resurrecting Baker Mayfield, and it looked kindly the same as last year. And if you really want to be cynical, it looked even worse than last year. So yeah, what's the path out for Bryce Young now? I don't think you could give him the excuses anymore that the situation was bad. I just think he needs to play better. And I don't know that there's a lot of hope for that, or the Panthers. The Panthers, they were down 30-0 to a really mediocre New Orleans Saints team in the first half. Like, where do you go from there? Like, I hope Bryce Young gets out of this.
You don't believe that Clint Kubiak bringing the Shanahan system to New Orleans is
I actually did like it. I was shocked to see the Saints lead the NFL in pre-snap motion, because they've never been a pre-snap motion team under Carmichael. So you could see the changes there. I think Derek Carr's going to be just fine. I think the Saints will be what they are. They're going to be an 8 or 9 win team. Like, they're a mediocre football team. But for them to just boat race the Panthers like that was like, oh my goodness, this is bad. And obviously Bryce is at the center of that, because now you look at the trade they made to go get him, picking him over CJ Stroud, and you're just like, this could turn out to be historically bad if Bryce Young continues to look like this.
Yeah, I didn't watch the game because I was at the Cleveland-Dallas game, but so I don't want to speak as much about specifically what happened in that game, but I think the context of what's happening here should be really informative around the league, because I think if you look at what happened with Bryce last year, he did not have the weapons going in. They wanted him to start right away. Obviously, as you said, CJ Stroud is lighting it up. And then he gets sacked 62 times. Only Sam Howell got sacked more last year. And I think that all of that is really, really hard to come back from, even if you get a better cast. And again, you can argue how much better his cast is, but when I look at that, I think, hey, this is why I don't believe Drake May should be starting yet for the Patriots, because I think that you can ruin a quarterback. I've talked to so many people around the league who believe if you don't have the offensive line, if you don't give them the weapons, if you have them seeing ghosts in that first year, and it's not necessarily a sign of a weakness on the quarterback. It's just like, yes, you can say the past is not predictive, all of that, but that is his experience with this team. And oh, by the way, and I know Frank kind of took a shot at David Tepper and his winners and losers, being like, hopefully there were no drinks nearby for David Tepper to throw. But I think that there is a lot to be said about how much last year is going to bleed over into this year. So I'm hoping for Bryce Young and the Panthers that they at least figure something out. But I do think that we should consider how much of the support Bryce Young should have gotten last year, how much he did get, and if that will impact the rest of his career.
That's interesting. That's a great point. Like you're right. Like I hadn't really thought of it in that context, but yes, I mean, when you speak of terms like ruining a rookie quarterback, this is what we're talking about, where bad habits form and you do see ghosts, to quote the great Sam Darnold, who Jason Fitz does not believe in. And maybe this does carry over for Bryce Young, and he's just he needs a total reset because his rookie year went so bad that maybe he doesn't bounce back from this so easily.
But
by the way, how much did you trade away to get this guy? Like, it's not good.
We need to acknowledge, guys, that the Carolina Panthers selected Bryce Young with the first overall pick in the draft. Last year, the Carolina Panthers had the first overall pick in the draft, even though it was traded away. After only 1 week, it looks like the Carolina Panthers could be bad enough to, again, have the first pick in the draft. You would be talking about historic level of incompetence, not just in the NFL, but in all sports. If you talk about having the first overall pick in the draft 3 years in a row, like this isn't just broken, this is dead for Carolina, and they got to find some way to dig their way out of it. But when you look at the level of ineptitude it has taken to get to where they are, you have to question how they can have a fresh start, how they can sort of reset the whole organization. Because I think it's fair to say Bryce Young might be seeing ghosts, but also it's fair right now to say everybody that wears a Panthers helmet is seeing ghosts, and everybody that's part of that organization understands it. And this is the type of losing that it takes a generation to work your way out of. Like, this is the type of bad that sticks with you for a decade while you try and bring in the right people that can fix the culture. All that has happened now. And I actually feel bad for Panthers fans. I feel bad for Panthers players. I feel bad for the administrative people that work in the building. Like, the culture around this organization is very, very clearly one of losing. And I don't know what turns that around.
And I think for all the reasons you just stated, there's no team that needs a big week 2 performance more than the Panthers, because they just need to feel good about themselves. Look, if they go out and beat the Chargers on Sunday, and I'm not going to pick it this week, Fitz, trust me, that ain't going to happen.
Do it.
Come on now.
But
come on now.
If they could go and have a good
Coward.
performance, you just say, week 1 got away from them, Superdome. Sometimes that happens. If they go out and lose 42-3,
their schedule's not terrible coming up.
It's not, and they could turn this thing around still. And I like there's a lot of 0-1 teams that really need to win in week 2, like the Bengals, who we think are going to be good, or the Browns. You don't want to, but I think just for organizationally wanting to like have some optimism going forward, there's no team on the hot seat more in week 2 than the Panthers. Just because if it looks like it did in week 1, you're just at that point you feel like it's September 15th and we're stuck. We're done. We're going to get that first pick again. We're the worst team in football. So it's got to look better for the Panthers in week 2, or it's going to be a really, really long season for them. And like you said, the morale across Charlotte will just be as low as it could possibly be.
I know we're not even to week 2 yet, but I just have to bring you guys to week 10 for a quick second, because in week 10, the Giants and Panthers are set to go to freaking Germany and play against each other.
No.
And that
Germany
is the
that
international game. And so I just want to know that if we've already seen that we can flex games late in the season, we can flex Thursday night and Monday night games, are we going to be able to flex international games because of the Giants and the Panthers?
Germany's like, we're not allowing.
Is this going to be what leads to the rule? Is it going to be the Bryce Young, Daniel Jones rule that we can going forward flex
or
games
the
out of Germany?
Drew Lock, Andy Dalton Bowl maybe by that point.
Think about it.
Season.
Imagine, I'm pretty sure it was Germany last year that got Patrick Mahomes versus Tua, and now you're going to get Daniel Jones versus Bryce Young.
The battle for who's going to get the number 1 pick, yes.
Hey, Raj, call me next time you're putting these international games together, because if you're trying to grow the game globally, maybe don't put two trash teams over in another country to show them the best of football. We do not have trash teams on Monday night. Still calling him Raj until I actually get that Roger Goodell interview. All right, Thursday night picks came in from last week. Right now, Jori and I are trailing Frank, flawless with this Thursday night selection of Kansas City. Jori and I flawed with our Thursday night selection, obviously, of Baltimore. We get another big matchup now, Buffalo at Miami. So Buffalo taking on Miami. Frank, as the leader in the clubhouse, good sir, you have first shot at this. Who's winning Thursday night?
I do appreciate that. I honestly was surprised by the spread here over at BetMGM. The Bills are 2.5-point underdogs. I honestly think the wrong team's favored here. I know I just keep hating on the Dolphins, but they were a Travis Etienne fumble away from losing at home week 1 to the Jaguars. I get that the Bills did look great out of the gates, but they did come back against the Cardinals and win that game. And I simply think the Bills are a better team. I think the Bills win this game. I get it. Short turnaround on the road. They have some injury issues, but so do the Dolphins. I mean, Devin Achane is already kind of hobbling around with an ankle. I just think that the Bills, simply put, Bills are the better team, and I think they win straight up.
Yeah, I kind of view this. I think they're both really talented teams, but when I see a game like this, I kind of view it as one of the big brother, little brother games. And I just think the Bills are going to have the Dolphins card as long as they want to. And I think this week will be one of those games. So I'll go Bills, but I'm a little disappointed because I kind of want to see if I can just get every single game wrong throughout the season. So I'm 0-1. So Dolphins, prove me wrong. Let's see if we can go 0-17, 0-18.
I think so. I don't think they have an 18th
a hell of a goal.
Thursday night.
That is a hell of a goal, Jori. I'm going to end up this holy triumvirate of all of us taking the Bills. The Bills are the better team.
No, don't do it.
I'm doing it. I'm doing it.
No.
I'm not afraid. I don't believe it. I'm not superstitious, just a little stitious. The Bills have the better quarterback. The Bills have the better coach. The Bills have the better team. I think the Bills are being slept on. I've said it all year. I think the Bills are going to assert their dominance in this one. And you're right. I think the running back injuries are already going to hit the Dolphins in a big, big way in this game. So I like Buffalo. All three of us agree on Buffalo, which means no matter what, Frank will still be ahead and still have the first pick next week. Our first pick with this show is always Stone. He's doing God's work producing behind the scenes. We appreciate him. You can follow us on Twitter. You know that. We'll be back Friday hanging out with C-Rob. As always, rate, review, subscribe. You know the deal. The reviews really help out too. So get out there, review the podcast. If you've made it all the way to right now, I don't even care if it's a review. Just go review the podcast. Rate, review, subscribe.
I think I care.
I care too. What are we talking about? What?
He
does not speak. Jason Fitz does not speak for Jori Epstein and Frank Schwab.
Give us a glowing review.
You can give Fitz a bad review, but talk about how much you love Frank and I on the podcast if that's what we're settling for.
That's a fair. Look, it can't be any worse than the reviews I get on social media every time they clip these things. All right. Thanks for listening. Thanks for hanging out with us. We'll be back on Friday hanging out with you. Enjoy the weekend. Thanks for your time.